Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 138. Who is running? This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're talking about the story told in the 2025 movie, The Running Man, as opposed to the 1987 version. How are you doing today, Mike?
Mike is doing good today. How are you doing?
I'm glad Mike is doing well. I'm doing good too. Thank you. And what's new in your writing world?
Oh, my writing world. You know, I'm having a hard time getting back into it after having paused for so long. I was just enjoying the end of the year and, the holiday season and playing games and watching movies. And then I moved and then I took a trip to Florida. And so I'm just trying to re-engage my brain right now and still catching up on, things from the move, updating addresses with people and stores, online places and stuff like that. So just catching back up from that. But mostly it's just got to crank up the brain to think writing again. So I'm kind of just working on that right now. That's it.
What do you find are the best ways to get your brain, to get the task initiated, the starting of the writing again?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess if I knew that, I would already be writing. No, there are things that will make me think more about stories and ideas and things like that. So just reading does that for me. Actually, reading another fiction book.
Okay.
I'll start thinking of my own ideas of oh, that makes me think of this. And I'll start, thinking of something else in my world or some other world. And that's mostly from actual reading. I don't get as much of that effect watching a movie or listening to an audiobook even. I guess it just activates a different part of the brain. Although I do get some of that in when I'm watching movies and listening to books, but it's not the same. So that's one thing that helps with just from story generation ideas.
Yeah.
And also, I forget who said this. Someone said this, I think maybe it was Neil Gaiman. I don't remember. Best way to think about new things is just to be bored. And I think there's something to that. When your mind isn't constantly engaged with scrolling through social media or watching movies or listening to music, it's just your mind's just bored.
Yeah.
It starts creating its own things, right? And I think there's truth to that. But as far as actually getting into gear, I don't know. I think at some point it's just having the task laid out and just sitting down and doing it. Getting back into a routine of okay, I'm doing this thing every day, right?
Yeah.
And I've been so out of that routine for so long. It's I've just got to kick back into it. I think once some other stuff, from finishing the moving stuff is done, it'll be a little bit easier. At least that's what I'm hoping. I really need to get going again. What's going on in your writing world?
Well, I have not actually done anything since last week, disappointingly, but I too have been working on a whole bunch of things. And when thinking about how to get started back into, doing that editing and moving forward in this series, and I was thinking about what I do in order to sort of task initiate.
Yeah.
One of the things that's helpful to me is listening to music. It has to be instrumental, no voices. It has to be sort of almost ambient in nature. Can't be too dynamic because then I'll focus on the dynamism of the song rather than let it sort of float back into the background. But the biggest trick for me is just opening the book and having a chapter open. I can't help but look at it and then the brain goes, oh, are we supposed to work on this now? And then all of a sudden I'm working on it. That's the biggest trigger sort of trick for me to do it.
Yeah.
Now, opening the book, that could be the task initiation slowdown right there. So that's when the music
Yeah.
comes in. The music sort of helps settle me down a little bit. I'm not thinking, oh, I have to do this, oh, I have to do that, oh, I have to do this. I can then just open it up kind of casually. Oh, I'm just going to have this open. But then that seems to work.
Those are great ideas. I don't always listen to music when I write, but when I do, it's the same as you. It's sort of ambient background music, new age type music,
Yeah.
or movie scores. Like you said, if they're not too dynamic or too tense.
If I know them real well, then I can't have them on the background. So if I'm
Yeah, right.
like,
Your mind starts going into that pattern.
right, Hans Zimmer, forget it. I can't do that because I know those movie scores too well.
Yeah. And anything like that, it's like you start listening to it too many times and your mind starts, falling into the pattern of the music as opposed to thinking about stuff. Okay, but yeah, those are good suggestions. I'll have to try those.
Yeah, let me know. And have you encountered any interesting stories in books, movies, or television?
I saw Tenet. I don't remember if we discussed that.
It seems that it does sound familiar.
Yeah, it's like it's a time travel story by Christopher Nolan, but it handles time travel in a unique way. Which, if you haven't seen it, I won't tell you what it is, just because it's kind of cool to see how it plays out. It might be an interesting movie for us to discuss on the podcast, actually, because I have positive and negative thoughts on it. Overall, I liked it, but I think there's some things about it that I and others would probably have issues with or questions about. So yeah, it might be something to discuss. But anyway, it was an interesting movie. I enjoyed his different take on things. I like those kind of stories. I know you like time travel stories as well. Especially since we just talked about Back to the Future recently. So that's in my mind, maybe.
I'm going to put that on the calendar. We just happen to have a gap.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, we don't have a gap anymore. Woohoo!
There you go. Yeah. How about you? Any interesting stories you've come across?
I finished reading Cinder by Marissa Mayer, and it's book one of the Lunar Chronicles. Talked about it briefly last week. It is a young adult science fiction story based loosely on the Cinderella story. I thought the writing was good. I wasn't actually real crazy about the end, only because it was clearly designed to make me go into book two. From that standpoint, it wasn't as satisfying as I hoped it would be, though the storylines were sort of kind of concluded. The big reveal, and I'm not going to say what it is, I'm not going to do spoilers, but the big reveal that is foreshadowed throughout the book happens almost at the end. And I think I would have preferred it to happen in the middle and then had the rest of the book sort of dealing with the fallout of the big reveal. I think that might have felt a little bit more satisfying, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I finished that book. Then I started a new book. It is called The Sea of Green by Tristan Smith. And it is also science fiction. At least it feels like science fiction. I just looked it up online and it's called a dark fantasy. It sounds so far interesting. So I will continue to read that and let you know what I think about it.
All right.
And then still using the lovely All Creatures Great and Small as comfort watching. And that's about it. Yeah. Are you ready to talk about The Running Man?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay. Today we're talking about the story told in the 2025 movie, The Running Man, and I'm going to read the overview that comes up when you type The Running Man into Google. In the near future, The Running Man is the top-rated show on television, a deadly competition where contestants must survive 30 days while being hunted by professional assassins. Desperate for money to save his sick daughter, Ben Richards is convinced by the show's ruthless producer to enter the game as a last resort. Ratings soon skyrocket as Ben's defiance, instincts, and grit turn him into an unexpected fan favorite, as well as a threat to the entire system. Did you enjoy this movie?
Yeah, I generally enjoyed this. I liked that it was different than the Schwarzenegger version, that it wasn't just a remake. I tend to feel like if you're remaking a story, I don't know, if it's something that people liked, right, that's already considered good, and you're just doing a remake, like modern version of it, that just seems kind of pointless to me. I just watch the original. So I appreciate the fact that this one was different. I think from what I've read that it's more faithful to the Stephen King story that it comes from. So maybe that's why. This is obviously a more serious adaptation versus the Schwarzenegger version. For me, it wasn't as fun as the original movie, right? I mean, obviously, it's intended to be more serious. I think it still works generally. Yeah, I haven't read the Stephen King story, so I can't really speak to how accurate it is to that, if one is more so than the other. I will say, I wasn't as entertained by this as much as I was by the original, but I was engaged throughout. That said, I wouldn't actively seek to watch this movie again, whereas I would watch the Schwarzenegger one again. It's just more fun. So let's talk about things that I liked in the movie. I liked the nod to the first movie with the Schwarzenegger being on the money. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
That was funny. It's a nice little reference to it. But then they didn't, he wasn't slavish to what happened in Schwarzenegger. So I think that was good. I thought the setup for him, for Ben Richards, the main character, being desperate and need cash now kind of thing, right? To give him motivation to try something a little bit extreme to get money to save his child. I thought that made sense. We understand his motivations for getting there. Although I do have a note about that, which we'll get to when we talk about what can be improved. I thought it was interesting and kind of neat that the network was working the people into a frenzy to join in on the hunt and report sightings of the runners. That was something that wasn't in the original version, really. That original was all kind of contained within this maze for the most part. And it seemed kind of plausible that kind of thing could happen, even in today's world, right? You have people ratting on other people and trying to get notoriety and things like that. So that seemed reasonable. But on the other side of that, I like that he also had people helping him throughout. The way they set this up, there's basically no way someone could survive this on their own, especially given all the technology that the people who are running this system had at their disposal. And it showed, that working together, people can accomplish so much more. So that kind of little theme in there, I thought that was good. And I would have thought it would be kind of weird at the end that Killian so easily got his followers to suddenly root for Ben Richards over his own hunters. But we've actually seen that kind of thing happen in real life. So I now have to accept that it's feasible and maybe somewhat relevant. That, it's a possible thing. So kind of like the first movie, I think it's like something that, even though it's extreme, you could see that with a little push in society in different directions, something like this might become a possibility, this kind of, Running Man game show. So yeah, I guess I would leave it to where I started with it. I was engaged with it, but I wasn't as entertained as I was with the first one. I feel like maybe. What did you think? Did you like this?
I didn't like it. It was okay. Like you, I stayed and watched to the end, and I didn't find it difficult to watch to the end.
Yeah.
I like you, I would not watch it again. And like you, I prefer the 1987 one, and we can talk about why in a moment. What I did like about this was grounding Ben Richards with a family. In the 1987 one, he's sort of just this guy who's running around being strong and beating people up, and then he gets the girl at the end. Yeah. And I liked this one with the grounding with the family and the idea that he was doing this to support his family as opposed to just raging against the man. I thought that was superior as far as the storytelling was concerned. That made this character seem much more three-dimensional, and I appreciated that. I also appreciated, like you pointed out, the world building in this is really good. There was a lot of thought given to what was there, why it was there, and how it served the story, in comparison to the 1987 version, which was essentially a plot-driven story, as opposed to this was a little bit more grounded in character, grounded in world building. So I really appreciated that. And also, because of that, it, like you said, it did make it very believable. It felt more real than the 1987 version, which again, I think you pegged it right. I had the exact same thought, was this one took itself very seriously, whereas the 1987 version did not. The reason I think the
Yeah.
1987 version is superior is because the 1987 version, not only did it not take itself seriously, it actually, I think, had a lot of irony in it. It was intended to be sort of an ironic story. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true.
And so it's not taking itself seriously, and it presenting this story with some irony, I think helped give it a little bit more depth, even though it was kind of a frolic in a lot of ways. Whereas I did not get the same kind of depth from this story, if that makes any sense. Yeah, there was more grounding with the characters. Yeah, there was more grounding in the world building, but it didn't. But that's as far as the depth went, at least in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess I can see that. I think the original was so over the top
Yeah.
that maybe you can't help but notice that. The original movie kind of felt like I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Verhoeven movies. I'm probably saying his name wrong. He did like Total Recall and
Yeah.
RoboCop, Starship Troopers. They're all very over the top.
Kind of almost tongue in cheek.
Yeah, tongue in cheek and yet satirical.
Yeah.
And this kind of had the original Running Man kind of had that feel. I almost thought maybe he directed it, but he didn't. But it had that kind of feel. This
Maybe
one's obviously very
satire
different.
is the right word, and irony is not the right word.
Yeah, I think it's maybe a bit of both,
Maybe.
right, for this one. Yeah, but I think I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So we've kind of sort of bled into this, but let's go ahead and talk about what we might have changed as a writer.
Yeah. While I mentioned that, I think they did a good job of like setting up his motivation. I don't feel that it did as well with setting up like his personal emotional state. He's just like angry from the beginning, and we don't really have any reason. Not even have any reason, but we don't know why he's so angry, like just perpetually. I mean, I get why he's angry that, he lost his job and he's trying to help his child. Like that makes sense, but it's just like this nonstop seething anger within him that we don't really understand until they basically explain it afterwards, like after we've already seen it over and over, where it's like, oh, he got fired from this job for doing the right thing, and he got fired from this job for doing the right thing. It's like, you should have showed us that up front so we understand, so we could feel what he's feeling, right? I think the Schwarzenegger movie did that so much better. We get to see him in action in the opening scene. He's trying to do the right thing. They go against him. They blame it on him. I get why he's angry. I get why, he does what he does. I would feel more for him in that sense than this guy. We didn't really get anything. He's just mad at this boss who fired him, which we don't even really understand why at that point, other than he seems angry already. So I think that could have been done better. Put us into a scene with him where we see him being treated poorly and something like that, right? Get us into his mind so that we can get into his feeling. So that would be one thing I would change. I mean, this is kind of not necessarily story related, but given that the director for this was Edgar Wright, who's done some really clever movies. We actually discussed one of his, The End of the World, where they're doing that bar crawl.
Oh yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he directed that. He does very clever scene setups and cuts and camera moves and action scenes. I just didn't get a lot of that here. Like, especially since I noted in the original Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger that the action scenes were very different and unique. These were just kind of normal and expected, and I was kind of disappointed by that. And I think that was something that made the original fun and was lacking from this one. Again, not necessarily writing, but it definitely overlaps, right? You could write how scenes would play out. I thought his, Ben Richards' fellow participants were weak and underutilized in this movie. They were literally just cardboard characters. And they pointed that out in the movie itself.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why they did that, but I didn't think that was the right way to go. I thought having characters who would try to help him, and maybe he could help turn them around and save at least one of them. He kind of saved the one guy at the beginning, and like that didn't go anywhere. That guy didn't save him, didn't help him, nothing. So I don't know. I thought they were underutilized, and it could have been more interesting to see him struggling with someone, or even if like they tried to find him and have him help them, and they ended up just getting him into trouble. Something a little bit more there would have been interesting. As it was, it could have just been him in the Running Man games, and nothing would have changed in the story whatsoever. So either utilize them or cut them out. At the end, I didn't buy that some pamphlet was going to revolutionize the country that this guy just printed up on his home printer. It just seemed so small and local. I think we needed to see these little pockets of resistance throughout the country. Maybe even ran into a couple of the different groups, and show that there was more of a concerted push of these different groups all working together that Ben Richards tapped into at the end. Maybe we see him getting directly involved. But as it was, it's like these things kind of just spawned up. We had the one guy who helped him do a video, and that person didn't apparently even know that Ben Richards was still alive. So I would have liked that to have worked more in concert at the end, where it's like he's now working with the groups and actively trying to resist. Obviously he comes in at the end, he's there, but he still just seems kind of like a lone person who snuck into that place at the end versus being part of the movement. So I guess I would have liked to have seen more resonance with those different elements of the story at the end. Yeah, those are some of the things I noticed. What about you? Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I came away from this movie saying to myself, who is Ben Richards? I have no idea who this person is, because they were trying so hard to make him two characters that didn't seem to mesh well with each other. One moment we would see good Ben Richards. I'm going to save this guy who's hanging. Yeah. I'm going to give the guy the bottle of booze to thank him for taking care of my family. And then we'd have angry Ben Richards, who would just be sort of creating acts of violence for no reason. It was like they did not know where to land with him.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what you were seeing. He didn't make sense. And the very end of this movie, which we usually have a spoiler alert at the beginning of all our shows. It's just part of our opening sequence. But again, spoiler, this movie came out in November, so maybe not everybody has seen it. It does track the Running Man 1987 loosely, so you know that the good guy wins and the bad guy loses. But to just walk in and shoot somebody? Is that good Ben or is that bad Ben? I mean, it was so...
Exactly.
It just didn't make any sense to me. I did not feel a connection with him and understand what his character arc was. He's a good man trying to save his family. If they had framed all of the things that happened to him through that constant lens of, I'm a good man shoved into terrible situations and I've got to make it work, I think that would have done it. But instead, they kept trying to turn him into an action hero.
Yeah.
And that's what I think didn't make it work. I think that's where it really struggled. And what you were saying about the movement, I think they tried to show the movement. And here's where I think it failed. We saw a lot of people like cheering Ben on and saying Richard lives, but they didn't connect that to the movement. It only seemed to be connected to the enthusiasm of the audience. And I think if they had taken a moment to have muttered conversations over here about, did you hear that this actually didn't happen this way? It actually happened that way. Gossip is a human hallmark. It's what humans do. And so to have this sort of subtext of gossip happening, the network is saying that he blew up this building to kill all these hunters. But did you hear that actually what happened is the hunters did it because they ignited something flammable with their guns and they blew up the building? Something like that, where you're seeing the rumbles underneath all of the cheering would have, I think, made then this whole underground movement change feel more real. Would have only taken a couple of little overheard conversations. And that, I think, could have done a lot, that sense that something's happening. And then it actually would have really made, if, like, for example, Killian, who's focused on ratings, is focused on, having the best show all of a sudden, best show and all that. If all of a sudden he realized, he got word of the rumbling and all of a sudden realized this was much more dangerous than he ever anticipated, then that could have been that depth to his character instead of, you're going to sign on because you're going to make me a lot of money as a television star. And now you're going to sign on so that I can find a way to kill you easily because you are now a rallying point for people who are learning things we don't want them to know.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have
that.
made it really cool. Would have just taken 5 lines of dialogue, maybe.
Yeah.
So I think that would be really interesting.
I don't know where Stephen King's original story went. I mean, maybe this was in the original story, but the endings of both these movies kind of seem to converge. They're different in sort of the setup and the bulk of the movie, but then at the end it seemed like, oh, we're coming back to the show, we're taking out the bad guy, we're igniting this resistance, kind of, but not like neither of the endings were really that satisfying in terms of the message they were trying to get across. So it kind of felt like the same in that sense.
And maybe that is consistent with the story.
Yeah, maybe.
I would say the other thing that was frustrating to me was the pacing. It was very inconsistent.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time in places and doing things that we did not need to. There are some things that could have been cut out wholesale to really tighten this up. We didn't need to see him watching a television show in his luxurious apartment as he waited for the game to start the next day. Could have skipped that entirely. Right. We spent a lot of time with the family talking about things that I don't think really needed to be talked about. We could have just set the stage. She's sick. We can't afford medicine. We're going to lose her. And him saying, I'm going to go get medicine and leaving the house. We didn't have to have a whole lot of conversation about anything else. Just go get the medicine. Those are the things that I might have changed.
Yeah, I agree with all of those as well.
So did you come up with any themes for the 2025 Running Man?
Yeah, I think one theme is similar to the original, which is like standing up for the truth, right? But I think that's maybe a smaller one here. It's certainly part of this. For me, it was more about standing up to the wealthy people who are manipulating you and using you as your playthings. And ultimately, the people rebel against Killian and this whole system that's put in place. So that's what I got.
And I kind of focused on his being called the initiator by that young man who was handing out the pamphlets. And that is that this is a very common theme. We've seen this in other stories too, is that one man can be the spark. So that's kind of what I pulled for that.
Yeah, that's good.
So is there anything that you take away from The Running Man as a writer?
There's a couple things I take away. I think, obviously, this is, The Running Man again. So if you're going to redo a story, it's better to have your own take on it, because I think with all of its flaws, at least it was mostly doing its own thing. It wasn't just a remake of Schwarzenegger's, right? It's like they involved the city, more with the citizens more. So I like that aspect of it. So I do think that was probably a good idea, and maybe that just comes from the original source material. But I think it was smart, regardless of how it turned out. I think that was a good idea. And if it had just been, let's redo the Schwarzenegger movie, I think it would have, it just would have felt like a waste of time, and then I would have been bored watching it. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, don't forget the fun. I think the first movie is just fun, and this movie, I think, took itself a little too seriously for what it ultimately ended up being. So those are my two takeaways. What is your writing takeaway?
Those are good takeaways. I think my takeaway, the biggest takeaway I take from this, was how valuable I found the grounding of this character with his motivations, with that very deeply personal family orientation. I think that really made a huge difference for me. I think that's one of the reasons why I stuck it through, was because I wanted to see if he was going to get back to his family.
Yeah.
Because his family, I was invested in them. Yeah.
And were you satisfied at the end?
Yes, sort of. I think one of the other things that kind of frustrated me throughout this story is once he became the Running Man, and he's got not only these professional hunters and all of these drones that can watch everything, and the people being egged on to find him is how not careful he seemed to be.
Yeah.
Why were you not living in the sewers? And so the ending felt the same way. Who isn't going to figure out who his family is and watch them just in case?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So,
That's what I was wondering. Is like that, has the system completely fallen apart at this point? They've moved
yeah.
on.
And in which case,
What-
we need to have some kind of knowledge of that. That needs to be pointed out to us.
Right.
But
yeah.
if that's the case, then why is he in a hood with his face covered?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. But
Okay.
I
Yeah.
was very invested in the family. And so to me, as a writer, remembering how to really ground a story into that very personal, because that's what people relate to.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us as we talked about The Running Man from 2025. Huge thanks to our Patreon supporters and all our listeners. If you want a story that carries some of today's vibe, E.W. Barnes writes clean, twisty sci-fi with big stakes. The Temporal Protection Corps is where duty to history collides with personal risks. And next up is Adventures of the Empyrean Guard, with interstellar missions, fractured allegiances, and galaxy-wide conflict. Link is in the show notes.
The Stories Told podcast is on all major platforms. Please like, subscribe, and follow to help us reach more story lovers like you. For book, TV, or movie suggestions, subscribers can drop a note on our YouTube channel. Join us next time as we talk about the story told in the 1956 film Forbidden Planet.
Wow.
Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.